Hi, welcome back. So Arknight's Endfield released into the world with a promise that it's going to be an Arknights game. This promise was made through the 5 Reconveners, Lavatane, Gilberta, Pogranichnik, Ardelia, and Snowshine. To put it simply, Originium is a really advanced magical space rock SSD card, probably still cheaper than current SSD prices, and it has its own universe inside of it. Once a person contracts a disease known as erypathy, their data is slowly copied into this universe, called the Assimilated Universe, and they are preserved inside of it. If you want to learn more, you gotta go check out the lore video I made, but that's a very simplified explanation. The 5 Reconveners are the assimilated versions of OG Arknights operators Surtur, Angelina, Heliger, Eyjafjalla, and Aurora. There is a small chance that a person doesn't even need to be infected to be reconvened, because all Terrans have a small amount of Originium in their blood. This means everybody could be recorded into the assimilated universe upon death, meaning possibly nobody is off limits. The promise I talked about is that Endfield was going to be an Arknights game, that it was going to show all of your favorite characters not in the 2D GB tower defense style of Arknights, but in an extremely detailed 3D world with insane facial expressions and animations, and hopefully you'll like it. So then what happened? It seems like we stopped at 5 Reconveners and we're not getting any others for a very long time. Definitely not for at least another 2 or 3 months while versions 1.3 and 1.4 wrap up. But I wanted to play Arknights. I wanted Wishadella Lapland in this 3D world, you might exclaim. Hush, child, I tell you. I have an explanation of what Arknights Endfield is doing, and I know exactly when we are going to get the next Reconveners and Reconvener lore in Arknights Endfield. So first of all, spoilers for the 1.2 story quest. It has very important lore to cover here, so if you haven't done that, go do it and come back and make up for clicking off the video by liking and subscribing and commenting to prove you were here. During the first part of the 1.2 story quest, Ardashir revealed something pretty huge about Terra, other than Terra's future being in the Endman's hand, which suggests some pretty insane stuff about the Endman, like them being the Doctor or Oracle. Ardashir talks about how he lived on the other side of the Cosmic Gate, the big structure that Telosians first passed through into Terra, and then the Telosians that turned into Terrans then went back to Talos II through. Specifically, Ardashir was called a Pasha, which is a title for nobility in the land of Sargon. A lot of important lore happens in Sargon, so much so that Arknights has a whole 2-season endgame mode based on Sargon lore, but as far as I can tell, it's not really important here. Another really important event in the 1.2 story quest is after the Neferith boss fight. When the Endman tapped into the assimilated universe, it looks much different than before, with the symbol being an upside down triangle rather than a rhombus, and it's also in a much worse state, representing the damage the blight caused to the first Originium crystal brought to Talos II, and it is this damage that allowed Warfarin to eject Reconveners from the assimilated universe. This means that the Endman is in control of that first Originium crystal and has a lot of implications about their identity, whether they are a product of Priestess and Doctor or even one of them. Implications, but the game is vague posting. So Ardashir is one of only 3 characters we know of that isn't a Reconvener and lived on both Terra and Talos II other than the Endman, and I think Endfield's devs are going to use Ardashir as a soft launch into Terran lore and Arknights Endfield by using whatever exposition he gives us to prepare us for the introduction of the other characters we know of that lived on both planets, Warfarin and M3. Warfarin is the leader of the Rhodes Island Enclave on Talos II, and if you don't know what Rhodes Island is, it's not the current WWE Champion's private island, it's the famous pharmaceutical company that employs mercenaries and operators, basically your home base in OG Arknights. Warfarin is the leader of the Talos II branch because Ami and the Doctor are simply not available. As she is the leader of this branch, she is obviously one of the most important characters in the lore of both games, but I feel like she's going to play, and is even currently playing, an even more important part in Arknights Endfield than she ever has in Arknights. Even though it was basically an accident, Warfarin was the person who figured out how to eject Reconveners from the assimilated universe and what they even are in the first place. She figured out everything about them, from their memories, their bodies, their appearances, to even their roles in life. So a Reconvener is a completely separate individual from their original counterparts. They do have many, if not most or all, the memories from their quote past life, but they would not necessarily make the same choices as their original counterparts. As for their body and appearance, well, they do not look exactly the same as their original counterparts. For example, Pogranichnik chose to look the way Heliger did back when he was much younger, while Gilberta chose to look the way Angelina looked much later in life, as Gilberta much more resembles Angelina's bloodline of combat skin. Ardelia chose to be Eyjafjalla, but without the blindness and deafness. Oh, wise choice, I must admit. Snowshine seemingly chose to be a slightly younger Aurora, with a slightly different outfit and much shorter hair, Lavatane and Surtur, while still having a different dress, much more closely resemble each other, but things are a little complicated with these two either way. OG Arknight Surtur's real name is Lavatane, Surtur being her code name. It's her code name because she is basically the domain of the Faramut Surtur, Faramuts being biological deities or gods in the Arknights universe. OG Lavatane is the domain of Surtur, however, as things stand, or stood back then, she was basically in control of it. So anyway, that's a lot of exposition that I just dumped at you all about Reconveners and characters connected to them. I didn't lie about knowing when more Reconveners are coming or when Reconvener lore is coming in the main story of Endfield. Okay, maybe I did, I'm just speculating here, but you've made it this far, so just bear with me. I think the promise that Endfield made is going to stand. It is going to be a 3D Arknights game. But first, it needs to make its own lore and have its own identity. It can't just be Arknights 2, as amazing as that would be, it needs to be Endfield first. 1.0 was their first attempt, and while it very much failed, it kept improving with 1.1, and now I'd consider 1.2 to be one of, if not the best 3D gacha game story quest of all time, with more coming on the way. So once Endfield has established a complete identity, we're going back to our roots and getting the first new Reconvener in Arknights Endfield. I think Endfield's major and most important story plot is still going to be centered around Originium, but instead of the central theme being the cure for Eripathy, it's going to be Reconveners. All the chapters that we're going to get in Endfield are going to be centered around them. The first major step is definitely going to happen towards the end of 1.x and towards the first anniversary, where I have no doubt in my mind that the anniversary character is going to be a Reconvener of one of the most popular characters in the OG game, either someone like Lapland or Wishadel, or any infected Abyssal Hunter squad member, and so much more. The one that would make the most sense to me is anybody who is very directly connected to M3 and Warfarin. It would be sorta funny if it was Amiya, but that would be kind of insane. I think they'd do that much later. I have a pretty realistic theory about how we would get introduced to both Rhodes Island and Warfarin, as well as how we get to know M3 more. It's going to start with a problem with the Administrator. Maybe after our mission in the North Wooling Exclusion Zone ends, the Endman has exhausted themselves and they are either stuck in the sarcophagus, can't remember anything again, or are on the brink of death. So Endfield Industries goes to one of the smartest people we know when it comes to Originium, Warfarin, and there it begins. The North Wooling Exclusion Zone saga is going to be incredibly important lore-wise, specifically because of the Faramut proxy. She's the 13th proxy of Sui, which is kind of an issue because there were only ever 12. This means that Shu and a couple of her siblings were indeed able to create a 13th proxy, and while this probably won't mean much for Reconvener or Originium lore specifically, it's going to answer a lot of questions about OG Arknights as a whole. So in short, we're getting the first new Reconvener and the first bit of Reconvener lore at the first anniversary of the game, as that makes the most sense. You can try and drop your thoughts about who you think will be the first Reconvener. My money is on either Wishadel or Lapland. As usual, you guys should give me a bunch of engagements by commenting who you want in Arknights Endfield. As usual, my top picks are going to be Pepe, Viviana, and Lemwin, but I know they're not infected, don't comment that. So that's it. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more content like this in the future, and join the Express Rain Discord server for our fun and lovely community to hang out with. Thank you again for watching, and I will see you next time.